Hello, good morning, good evening, good night, whichever it is where you're from. My name's Sam. I'm also known as Sam J. White on Facebook or Samuel J. White on the front of my books. I usually do interviews for other indie authors and reviews for other indie authors, but today we're here to talk about my new book, Maria's Photograph, because it's on pre-order now and it's coming out on the 9th of November this year, 2019. So Maria's Photograph is a prequel to a true ghost story which happened in the early 1990s at Hevingham Primary School in North Norfolk, where I grew up, where I lived from 1985 to 2008. Obviously I was only 4 or 5 at the time, so the teachers at the school would not disclose the information to someone that young. So the basis of what I've heard from people who know bits and bobs about it since is that as part of the history lessons, one of the pupils at the school at the time brought in a photograph of an Edwardian or Victorian girl who once went to the school. And all of the time that the photograph was at the school, things were happening, really weird things like the furniture being moved around overnight, things going missing, being turning up in different places and stuff like that. And the teachers were quite freaked out by it. So the head teacher got rid of the photograph and the thing stopped, and that's the end of the story. But that wouldn't make a great novel. So one of the main things that people can remember, of course, is that the girl in the photograph was called Maria. So what I've done is decided to give Maria a backstory. So my story is told through the eyes of a young school teacher called Judith, who has just moved to the area from Essex after losing her husband during the war, and this is the story of her encounter with the photograph of the girl called Maria. So one thing I drew inspiration from is a book I read when I was quite young. This is a book by Helen Creswell called Moondial, and I remember specifically the BBC adaptation, the character called Sarah singing the song Poor Mary Sits a Weeping, and I replicated that because Maria to me seems like her, and she sings that song to herself because she wants a playmate, and she sees Judith as being her playmate from another time. So the young widowed schoolteacher Judith finds the photograph of Maria waiting for her on her kitchen table when she moves into her new house in the upper village. So initially Judith, the young schoolteacher, she struggles to make friends within the village, and she often finds herself lonely and dreaming of the life that she could have had if her husband was still alive. And sometimes she speaks to the photograph as though it's her friend because she has no one else to speak to at those times, and it seems at points to come alive and control her dreams. She dreams about the girl in the photograph and who she was and what she's grown up to be, what her life was like, and stuff like that. And sometimes the girl in the photograph seems to talk back to her, but then also some very strange things start to happen around the photograph, like matches moving around to form words underneath the photograph and arrows and pointing at things and stuff like that. Just little things starting to show some poltergeist activity there. Mixed in with this, a young boy at the school, Thomas, who's had a troubled past. His mother died when he was born. His father was in a prisoner of war camp, and he's not known his father his whole life until his father comes back just before Judith joins the school. He has started to see visions of a young girl at the school, and he is often seen talking to nobody, and Judith wonders whether this is linked in with the photograph and what it's trying to say to her. She then tries to help Thomas by helping him with his schoolwork, which he's very much behind on, and becomes good friends with his family, and then more and more stuff starts to fall into place with the photograph and what it's trying to tell her and everything like that, and it's trying to give her a warning that her life might be in danger, but it sounds very threatening at times, as if the photograph or the girl in it is threatening her personally. But I'm not going to go too much more into the story because I don't want to spoil it. I want you to read it. So I wasn't able to get to the village today, but I've decided to use Google Maps to show people a bit more about what the place and the setting is like now. I'm quickly going to use a little bit of magic to click it back into 1947. So the house you can see on the right hand side at the end is the house where I grew up and where my mum and dad currently still live. Moving on up the street, we're going to take a little flight here, and we're going to take you to the school where the centre of the activity is. As you can see, most of these houses, from the look of them, they didn't even exist when I was living in the village, some of them. So they definitely were not here in 1947, so you can imagine how much more secluded the village was then than it is now. So in the book, I described the school as having the headmaster's cottage right next door. Now you can see where the cottage is. It's not necessarily the same building, but you can see in the wall, if you look on the left-hand side of the school, you can see where the gateway was, where the headmaster could go from his cottage straight to the school. Unfortunately, that's all been redeveloped, and you can see where the new bricks are in the wall where there previously wasn't a wall, and there's now this ugly garage building built there where the garden would have been, which is a real shame. So this house here is where I envisaged Judith's cottage being. The reason for that is because it's right at the end of a footpath which goes straight to the school, so logically, if it's at the end of the footpath which goes straight to the school, that would be the best place possibly for a teacher to live. So again, this is why I did this, but in the story, Judith often describes the walk to the school or to the headmaster's cottage, and how she enjoys seeing the nature and how it changes throughout the year and stuff like that. And a lot of people don't know about this place, but we studied it when I was at school, and a lot of the adults in the village didn't even know about it. We did a project where we had to go and scout out the footpath and report to the local council as to whether it was being maintained properly or not. That's quite an interesting story, but it's nothing really to do with what we're talking about here. So if you walk along the footpath, you'll see a farmyard, and this is called Avenue Farm, universally known in Heavingham as the Smelly Pig Farm. Now, if you were to make a film about the apocalypse, the first place that I would start is this farm. It is absolutely disgusting out the back. It's like, it reminded me of visiting the trenches that were used in the First World War, only the fact that they'd never been cleared up. And there's just stinks and there's mud everywhere, and it'd be a great film set. I mean, this was like this 30 years ago, and it's still like it today. It hasn't changed at all. When I was a kid, on bad days, you could actually smell the place over a mile away. It was that bad. So we're moving on, we're following the footpath down past the school into the lower village where we find a farm. Now, in reality, this place is called Doctor's Hills Farm, but for the sake of the story, it's what I call Green Lake Farm. This is where the Smith family live, and they become friends with Judith, and she is looking after their son Thomas, who is the one I explained about, who sees visions of the ghost and needs help with his learning difficulties. Well, he's not got learning difficulties, but he's behind with his schoolwork, and she often visits them there, and later finds out that this is where Maria grew up. So in the story, there's also a lake, and the lake is actually on this farm. Maria, in the early 1900s, she liked to sit by the lake, or in her boat on the lake. Her boat was called the HMS Maria, named after herself, obviously. Yeah. So during this time, Judith's life is obviously turned upside down by several goings on, which I'm not going to go into. But the book, I felt, should be set in the winter of 1947, because the village in itself is cut off, would have been cut off a long way from the main city and transport and any food supplies or anything like that. Anyway, without the dangers of winter, and the winter of 1947 was one of the worst in British history, and lots of people died, and everything would have been turmoil. Now imagine being stuck in a building with a ghost in the middle of nowhere, and you can't get out, and you're stuck in the snow, and it's terrifying. And I felt I should put Judith in this situation with Maria and the other entity that I've not spoken of. That was kind of spooky. So for those of you who didn't know, I'm just putting some pictures up here of what the winter of 1947 looked like in England, and how scary that would have been to be left in that situation for a young woman on her own. I'm not going to go too much into it because you're probably already kind of turning off already by now. So I just want people to know that the book is available from the 9th of November this year. It should have been available on Halloween, but there were some delays with it, and you can pre-order it down there, and I'm probably going to have some things saying you can pre-order it down there, and you can subscribe to my channel. Please give this book a go. It's something much different to any normal ghost story, I believe, that you would have heard before. Please give it a go. Pre-order it down there. My name is Samuel J. White. I also have another book out, A Midwinter Night's Dream, The Broccoli, the Stilton and the Haystack, and I have another book on pre-order as well, which is called Derailed and Dispersed, and that's the beginning of a series. Please don't think that everything that I've said in this video is just describing this book in general, because there's so much more to this book than what I've described here. It's so hard to describe your own work. Thank you if you have taken the time to watch this video, and I hope you enjoy the book. It's down there. It's called Maria's Photograph.